guys, I am Dani and welcome back to Summer Skye Gardens. If you're new here, thanks for joining. So I live in Spring, Texas, which is right north of Houston, Texas, and I have a flower farm in Splendora about 20 minutes away. Both areas are zone 9B now with the new USDA map that's been updated. And today I wanted to show you guys my mum update. So I posted a video a while back about how to grow heirloom chrysanthemums. I started last year, they did great, and this year I dramatically expanded my just number of plants as well as all the varieties I'm growing. So I did a video about a lot of the basics on growing heirloom chrysanthemums. I will link it below if you want to check that one out. This is an update now that they have all been blooming. Some of them are starting to fade, some of them are still blooming super nicely. So I wanted to show you the different varieties I grew and kind of the good and the bad with each one, and you know how things went as expected or didn't go as expected. If you like this video, be sure to give it a thumbs up, shoot me a comment if you have any questions, and let me bust the mums out. So in general, the mums did really well, especially where I live. We typically have a really long, hot summer, and this year it was really bad. We had almost 3 months where virtually every day was up in the hundreds. We didn't get any rain for almost 3 months, so it was pretty bad. So I decided to grow my mums in grow bags, and I'll show you right here what that looks like. And that's because I started them at my home and then I moved them out to the farm once we had this property. I know a lot of people that grow in grow bags or pots and keep them like that. I don't know if I'm going to keep them or move them to a spot in the ground. I haven't really decided yet, but I will be moving them from where they are right now. I put them behind the house just so I had easy access to them. I could water them easily, and because this area was a little bit of shaded during the summer, which was perfect for them, because when I had them in full sun, they were just wilting and hating life. So I think if you live in a hot climate like I do, you've got to have the ability to give your mum some shade during the summer when the heat is super intense. And then when it starts to cool off, they can definitely handle and enjoy full sun all day, like a good 8 hours or longer. Another lesson that I learned, I knew they would grow and I needed to support them, and I thought with them being in the grow bags where they were, I could just put in some bamboo stakes and use like plant Velcro, but a lot of them grew super tall, they got way too heavy, and were just flopping all over the place. So if you're gonna grow mums, you definitely need to net them or corral them, have some sort of stronger support system. So that was definitely a good lesson I learned, and when I move them, I will have that set up. So let me start with some of the more darker fall colored varieties. So this first one we have is Crimson Tide. Let me show it here. Super pretty big blooms, and I'll preface this by saying I did not disbud anything. So when you're growing mums, ones that are not sprays, like this one for instance, when the stem starts to grow, you can leave one bloom and take off the other ones before they've opened up, and the main stem, the main bloom, will get a lot bigger. I just didn't have time. I didn't want to mess with that this year. I wanted to see how they would do without doing it. So, you know, this bloom, this center bloom, would probably be way bigger if you disbud, and I'll probably try that with a lot of these varieties next year, including this one. But I think even without disbudding, when you get this many flowers on one stem, it really works nicely to fill out a bouquet or an arrangement. So I think that there's kind of good and bad with disbudding or not disbudding. So Crimson Tide overall, I really like. I think this is a beautiful color. It goes with a lot, and I definitely want to grow more of this next year. I will say it was not super productive. I did lose a couple of baby plants in the summer on this particular variety. Overall, most of my plants survived, but there were a few that did not make it, and I had a few of the Crimson Tide ones. But you can see gorgeous color, super big and fluffy. fairly long stems. I mean, this I cut shorter, but fairly long stems. And this is kind of I made a printout of all of the varieties I'm growing. So this is a picture of how it looked online. You can see it's pretty true to form. So definitely recommend this one if you want one that's kind of more of that reddish gold color for the fall. Okay, another one that I grew is Seaton's Ruby. So you can see right here, it's kind of reddish, orangey. You can see where the center really puffs out, and then you get all of these little petals around it. I thought it was interesting as time went on. They started out a little on the smaller side and then got a lot bigger as time went on, especially if I left the stems on the plant. So that's something to think about. I don't believe this is a traditional spray mum. I cannot remember off the top of my head, so could definitely try disbudding and see if you could get this bigger. But honestly, I really like, since these are a little on the smaller side, I really like keeping them, you know, as a spray like this. It was fairly productive, you know, decently long stems. Can't say anything bad about it. I think it's super pretty, and it really paired well with a lot of stuff. And then this is a picture from King's Mums. So you can see it looks pretty similar. I thought it would be more, I don't know, like where the petals were pointing downward based on this picture, but really pretty. All right, next one up is Kelvin Tattoo, and this is a traditional spray mum, which means you're gonna have a lot of blooms on one stem. I love this one. I think number one, the color is phenomenal. It's really dark in the center and then kind of fades out to this gold color. So it has this really pretty ombre effect. It really pairs well with a lot of other of the mums and flowers. Super long stems, a lot of stems, so very productive. Highly recommend this one. And you can see where it looks pretty similar to the picture. Next one up is Kelvin Mandarin, another spray mum. Really pretty color. It's kind of like a faded burnt orange. Super pretty shape. And I've grown this one before and I loved it last year. I dried a bunch of stems and that was also very pretty. So definitely like this one, and it's fairly productive. Not as long as stems as the other Kelvin, but overall I think a must grow. So this next one I have is super interesting because it, in my opinion, kind of dramatically changed, and I don't know if it was with the weather or just time, but this is Judith Baker, and these are both stems of Judith Baker. So this is kind of when it started blooming early, and this was, I think, the first mum I had that started blooming. It has this like kind of goldeny color, smaller flowers here that open up. Pretty good stems, very productive, and you know, definitely really enjoyed this one. But I thought it was interesting as time went on the plant, the newer blooms produced bigger flowers that were darker, had more of like this orangey color, and would kind of only have one or two flowers on a stem instead of this many. So this is definitely one you want to disbud to get a much bigger flower, but I like both of these. I think the colors are nice, and I think, you know, whether you want to, you know, leave it like this or not, these were super pretty. And you know, either way you want to go, I just think it's interesting how, you know, either the weather or the timing, you know, really changed this one. All right, the last one that I'm going to show you as part of like the fall colors, goldens, you know, darker colors, is Bronze Fleece, which I think is just so stinking cute. It's a spray mum. It has these teeny little flowers that are like gold in the middle with this peachy orangey petals around it. The only negative is all of mine were short. So this was probably as long as I got the stems to work. So definitely could not use this in like a wrapped bouquet. You could totally sell these to florists. You could use them in like smaller arrangements for Thanksgiving. It produced a lot of blooms. They were just, the whole plant was like just short. So I don't know what happened. Maybe it was too shaded where it was. I'm not sure. I mean, I'm definitely going to grow it next year because I think it's just so cute. And I'll be interested to see if it gets any bigger. It may not make the cut long run if I can't get longer stems because it'll just be too hard to work with. All right, let's move on to some of the yellowy varieties. So this is Equinox. Really kind of funky spray mum. This is one that you want to disbud. This one was okay. I think the bad thing, I like the color and I like the shape, and some of them got pretty big, but a lot of them had this brown black discoloration right away. And I don't know if that's water damage, or I read that it might be heat damage because this was an earlier one to start blooming when it was still fairly hot. Some of the later varieties looked a little bit better, like this one. So I'm kind of on the fence. I have a lot of these plants. I mean, I'm going to grow all of these next year, but I'm kind of on the fence if this is worth growing overall or a keeper, especially when there's some other, in my opinion, prettier yellow varieties. So maybe check back with me next year. All right, this next one I have is Alexis Apricot. And this is one that also looked different from the picture and grew different. So it looked like the earlier varieties were kind of more of a trending more towards a apricot color, kind of like a like just a darker, creamier yellow, a little bit bigger flowers. And then the later blooms kind of turned more lemony yellow and got smaller. So I'm not really sure what happened other than just weather changes. I mean, I think this is a gorgeous flower, definitely a must grow. If you just bud it, it'll get really big, very productive, very, very productive, lots of flowers, lots of stems on each plant. But when you look it up online, a lot of times you'll see it's a little more like orangey colored than what I got. So I don't know if that's a normal variation or just has to do with the weather, but overall, I love this one and I think it is an absolute must grow. All right, so the next one I'm going to talk about is called Cheerleader, and here it is right here. So it's not much different from the Apricot Alexis, which I'll grab here in a sec. It is bigger and more fan versus the Apricot Alexis is more like cupped, and the color here is definitely more orangey golden. I think it's beautiful. This would be a disbud mum where this head would get a lot bigger. So here you can kind of compare. So not too much different, but this one's a little more golden, this one a little more creamy yellow. I think both would also be gorgeous for weddings. This one is a little more of a cupped shape and this is a little more of a fan. Do you need both of these? Maybe not. I do. I just think they're so beautiful. I love any kind of yellowy, orange, peachy flowers. But definitely recommend. The only negative was this particular variety. I lost, I don't know, all but one or two cuttings, and I don't remember what happened. This was one that was actually at my house that was extra that I grew. So it wasn't very vigorous. It was planted in my front bed, so I can't really comment too much on like how many, you know, stems it would probably put out. But what it did put out was gorgeous. I had a couple like this, so you know, I'm definitely going to grow it next year because it's super pretty, and I'll have to see kind of more how it does here at the farm. Okay, so I'm going to transition more to like white, cream, pink, and purple flowers that I grew. The first one that I'm going to show you is French Vanilla. Now, I was really excited about this one, And this one might have been one of my bigger disappointments. This bloom looks great, but you can see where the stem is super weak. The earlier blooms that I got, and this was the first one that started blooming, so it was still hot outside, and most of the blooms had like blackening or browning around them. It had rained. We finally had got some rain at the end of the summer, beginning of the fall. So I don't know if that damaged the blooms or it was the heat stress. Like I said, I've read where both can cause black and browning on the petals, but it pretty much made the earlier blooms unusable, which was a big bummer. It wasn't super productive, and as of now, it's pretty much done, other than this is the last bloom that it put out, which is way past its prime. So this one's pretty, but like, you can't hardly use it. So like I said, I'm going to grow it again next year, but as of right now, I am not impressed. So if you were looking to buy new mums, I don't know that I would start with this one if you have limited space or you can only get like a few varieties. I'll show you a couple of others that are more of a creamy tone that I would recommend more. Okay, so this next one I'm going to show you is called Vesuvio. Definitely super funky shape. Has this like center gold and then these spiky petals that came out. And the interesting thing was when these first pop out, they're more of like a whitish color, and as they age, they were turning like purpley. So that's really fascinating. Not a huge fan of how this one turned out. I know some people that absolutely love this one. I think it's okay. I would use it as a spray. And I will say the few plants I had were not very vigorous, only put out like a few stems. So meh, not my favorite overall. Now, if you want to grow one that looks a little bit like Vesuvio, but it's better, this one is Flair. And you can see where the center is kind of like goldenish green. And then the petals are mostly cream, but like a little hint of like this pinky purple color. This was super vigorous, tons of stems. I want to say this is one that you could disbud. I'm not 100% certain, but I would assume if you did, then the main bloom would get a lot bigger. I did have a lot of stems that I could use, but I did have a few that got like these blackish petals that made them kind of unusable. Now, some of them I could just go in and like pick them out and they were fine. I do think some of that was because these stems got really tall and heavy and they flopped on the ground since I didn't have adequate support. So that might have been my fault, but I thought these were super lovely. They really paired well with my pinky purplish mums, or you could put them with yellowish because you have kind of a mix of both colors. I did a bouquet recently as a teacher gift that had pinks and yellows, and I put this in it and it kind of tied it all together. So I thought that was really pretty, but I really like this one. I like that it's like a different shape. So, definitely recommend this one. Now, if you're really wanting more of a creamy-ish, romantic looking mum, especially for wedding work, then I definitely recommend Seaton's J'adore. And you can see overall it is mostly creamy. It has like a little hint of pink right there. This is just absolutely gorgeous. The flowers did really well with, not having like the weather damage or rain damage that some of the other ones did, especially like the French vanilla. And this would definitely be a good disbud because you can see like this center bloom would get really, really big. I mean, I've seen pictures where they get really big and gorgeous. But even as a spray, like look at that, like one stem, they were nice and long. It is heavy. So I think that's the only negative, is if you leave all the blooms on there, it kind of flops a little bit. I mean, when I used it in a few arrangements recently, it was kind of propped up by other flowers, so it looked fine, but they end up being a little heavy on the thinner stem, which I think would be fine if you disbudded it and you just had one bloom. But Look how gorgeous that is for weddings. And the good thing with mums is they do fine out of water, and they will last 1 to 2 weeks in water. So, I mean, you can really use these for anything and everything, but this was probably one of my favorites. All right, this next one I loved and was super, super interesting. This is probably one of the ones that changed the most, and that was Chelsea. And you can see kind of the range of coloration. It was a great producer, decently long stems, but the interesting thing to me was the earlier blooms were more creamy white. Like this one looks, you know, definitely whitish. This has a slight pinkish tone here. But as it aged, it got pinker. So kind of, it would start to look like this, where it was like this soft pinky color. And then the most recent blooms look like this, where it's definitely pink. Like you would not call that cream at all. But I think it's just so gorgeous. I'll definitely disbud this one next year so I can get some really big blooms like this. But I think, you know, any of the colors are so pretty. And I paired some of this with some of the yellow, like the Apricot Alexis, and that looked really pretty in a bouquet. And I think this is just gorgeous for weddings. Even though these bloom in the fall, you know, somebody might still want, you know, pastel pinks and creams. So this would be really perfect for that. Now, another one that ended up changing some was Peter Magnus. So this is a spray mum. I love this one. It's so pretty. The stems were decently long, not super long, definitely longer than the bronze fleece, but just look at that color. I mean, the middle is like this creamy color, and then it fades to like a pinkish purple. This one was interesting too, in that the earlier flowers started out more pinkish purple, or, well, I don't want to say earlier flowers, like when they first bloom, they're darker. And then if you let them sit on the plant, and you can see where it's a little tighter center, if you let it sit on the plant, it starts to open up like this and then kind of fades. So, I mean, I think this is pretty, and I think this is pretty. This is probably more of my favorite, but super, super vigorous. I mean, each plant put out so many stems, I can't even use them all. I'm going to try drying them and see how they dry, but this is just gorgeous. This was one of my favorites, and I think would just be beautiful for any type of work, but especially like wedding work. All right, next one I have is called Purple Light, and you can see definitely a purpley pinkish color. I love the blooms. I love the color. The plants themselves kind of sucked. Didn't put out a ton of stems, like a few. And then if you can see here, super weak stems. So once again, I don't know if this was the growing conditions, if this needed to be disbudded, if it would get like a thicker stem that would hold the bloom up. But this is virtually unusable. I think I did put a couple of stems in an arrangement where they were held up by other flowers, and that worked out. But just like this, like, no, you cannot sell this or even hardly use it, which is a bummer. So I'm going to try them again next year, see how they do with more support and disbudding, because, I mean, the color is super pretty, the shape is pretty, but if we're getting ones like this, then they are out of here. Next one I have that is definitely like a pink flower is Quanyong Hung, right here. Gorgeous color, this really soft pink. You know, the blooms are definitely cupped and kind of curl out. This one would definitely be a good disbud, because I think this bloom would get really nice and big. The only negative with this one was some of the blooms, when they started to open, they already had like that dark coloration that like my French vanilla got. So this is an old one, so of course it's browning up, but some of them right when they started blooming, like the the bottom edges were already getting black and brown, which made those unusable. So that kind of sucked. Otherwise, like, it's a good producer, good stem length. I mean, I think the blooms are gorgeous. So I definitely want to, you know, give this a good try. But if a lot of the blooms are going to end up getting that discoloration, then this may not make the cut just because for that reason. All right, y'all, so here we are at the last flower, and this is Mocha. So let me get it in a little closer. So you can see it's like a mauve color. It's a spray mum. Definitely want to disbud this one. All of mine are curved because they got so floppy that they fell on the ground. I think this is I swear to God, side note, this oak tree above me has been dropping acorns for a few weeks now, and it sounds like freaking gunshots landing on the metal roof. I think it's almost done. Okay, let's start again. So this is Mocha, and it's this really pretty mauve-y color. It's like a spray mum. Mine got too heavy, and so all the stems kind of flopped on the ground. That's why the flowers are kind of pointed up like this. But I would definitely disbud this one and get like a really big, nice bloom in the middle. The stems got really long, but I think they're a little on the weaker side. So once again, I want to see how this one will grow with better support. With it being disbudded, maybe it won't be so heavy, but I do think the form and the color is very, very pretty. It wasn't a vigorous producer, but a handful of stems per plant, so I do think it's worthwhile. And I mean, this color is just really, really pretty. I think super lovely for wedding work, because you could match this with creams or pinks or you know, purpley colors, and I think it would just be really pretty. All right, so there you have it. I went through all the varieties that I grew this year. I'm planning on expanding even more next year. The mums were very popular with my customers and with florists, and I think next year when I have a lot more business, I'll be able to sell a ton more. I wanted to end the video by just saying, if I only had to pick 3 of all the mums that I was growing this year, just to get a different variety, I think I would pick these 3. This is the Kelvin Tattoo. I just think the color is absolutely perfect for fall, and it's super versatile. Definitely Seaton's J'adore. Beautiful, vigorous performer. Perfect flower to really go with anything and with wedding work. Oh, tell you what, I'm gonna do 4 flowers. Apricot Alexis, just because it produced a ton of stems and the color is just really, really lovely. Nice big full flowers. And then Peter Magnus. I mean, this one, so pretty, so cute. I love it so much. So yeah, there you go. 4. I couldn't narrow it down to just a couple, but these are probably my top ones that I grew this year. But like I said, you know, a lot more coming next year, and hopefully this time next year I'll do another updated video. But thank you guys for tuning in, and I will see you in my next video.